Okay. Good, fantastic. So first up, congratulations to those who ran the fsQCA for the first time. You have run your first model, so well done on that. Okay. Now, so what we did, so many of the questions that you raised, and very, very legitimate questions as well, which anyone would raise when doing it for the first time. So we'll go through those again. So idea was that we do the overall broad picture, theorizing mode of inquiry. Then you run a small demo, which you have done, fantastic. And now what I'll do is I will recap what Ahmed has done, right? So that will clarify as well. Again, so see, we talked about three aspects of complex causality: conjuncture, that combination of input or explanatory variables; equifinality, multiple paths; and the third one is causal asymmetry. For causal asymmetry, we should run our fsQCA analysis twice. One for the survived, and one for the negation of survival breakdown, which you just did. And it's pretty easy, 1 minus 0, right? It's that easy. Now we had 5 explanatory variables. Very good question. What was the source of data? We don't know. And this is the beauty of QCA as well. And this is how qualitative data can be used. Great opportunities, because the whole qualitative, inductive, thematic analysis is once done, and our objective is to convert those to numbers like we have done that here. It could have been qualitative, it could have been a survey, probably the multi-method approach, whatever. But our objective in this was that we start from calibrated data. How to calibrate is $1 million question, and it is the most important thing, and we'll talk more shortly. So what we did was we had calibrated data. Now you would see 0.81. All this would, because of the Boolean logic, would be either converted into 1 or 0 based on their combination. Each of the configuration was actually a combination, right? So there'll be OR and AND operation within that. We'll have something. If it's more than the threshold, 0.5, it goes to the next. Otherwise, it stays back. And that's why we get the truth table, right? The output was truth table, which Ahmed did. So we haven't touched calibration. We shall talk about it. I'll review what Ahmed did, and then we go back and talk about calibration. So you generated the truth table. So the argument is that if any combination of explanatory attributes is consistently resulting in an outcome which is more than 80%, 8 out of 10, we can assume that configuration would create that outcome. That's what the sufficiency threshold Ahmed put 0.8. For necessity, because it's almost always, we use a threshold of 90%, that this condition would be present 9 out of 10 times to cause that outcome. So that's the logic behind that. As Ahmed did, exactly, you see on the screen, you can see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what Ahmed did was he used that coding screen, he coded 0.8 as contributing to the outcome. So we had this, and you very rightly said, just 2 of the configurations, combination of causal conditions would lead to an outcome, 1. Rest would not. Again, it's equifinality. So the outcome can be achieved by 2 combinations, 1 and 2. Right? So we see equifinality here. It works on equifinality. Okay. Now, there was some raw consistency is something that we talked about, that consistency. There are 2 other types of consistency. I'll talk about that later. The 0.80 is based on raw consistency, right? Okay. We got this one. That was the truth table, right? And we didn't. So normally each case would correspond, or the cases could correspond to a configuration, which you saw here. First configuration. So Belgium, Czech, Netherlands, and UK, the stability, there was democracy was survived, and based on these things, they had higher of developed, urban, literate, and then Finland and Ireland. Remaining, because the consistency score is less than 0.80, we say that the democracy did not survive. Okay, so we had 32 configurations. The original example was 4, right? So 2 raised to power 16 in the colorful picture that I showed you earlier. Here we had 5 causal conditions, 2 raised to power 5, 32 configurations, 32 combinations. Not all of those combinations are empirically observed. When Ahmed said 1, that means at least one case needs to be present. If one case needs to be present, that means we have empirically observed from our data. So we just confined our analysis to empirically observed. Most of the configurations were not empirically observed, so we removed them from our analysis. Okay, so yeah, and then Ahmed did necessity and sufficiency condition analysis as well, which we are just, it's a good practice, but our focus is sufficiency analysis combination, right? Necessity is part of the journey, right? But it is good to know which condition or which explanatory variable would always be present. Okay. Now, some of you were talking about something which is a very important point, right? That why, so that, it's, if a stable democracy, it's a stable country, economically stable or politically stable, it's more likely. So that's what our expectations are, right? So that's what Ahmed put all causal conditions, because all 5 causal conditions, our expectation or prior knowledge or prior substantive body and substantive reasoning or body of knowledge tell us that if countries are like this, their democracy should survive. So we put that as, that's our theoretical explanations. Yes, Manuel.
Yeah, just one little question regarding that. So that assumption that I make there, that, for example, developed leads to my certain outcome, I do that on the individual basis on the causal conditions, right? So like, I don't say, like when I look at it, I just say, okay, developed in my assumption that developed needs to be present for this outcome too. But I don't like do the combination. I don't have to. Okay.
Individual basis.
Yeah, that was the question. Thanks.
So, and so that's a very important point. Now, why I point is, now we've talked about this one, and now what? So see, there are 3 solutions as Ahmed mentioned to you. One is the parsimonious one is the complex one, and one is the intermediate solutions, right? Each 3 of those carry some important nuances. So this standard analysis, where you give theoretical expectations, corresponds to intermediate solution. How? I'll just talk about that one. Okay, here are 3 solutions, right? The theoretical expectation manual that we manually entered, right, based on what we think should occur, does not comprise complex solution. Complex solution is purely based on what is empirically observed, right? But as researchers, we need to be thinking beyond our empirical sample, especially the sample is small, right? Other possibilities which we are unable to empirically observe. For that, there is a term called logical remainders. For parsimony solution, logical remainders are added to the algorithm. They become part of the truth table minimization. And what are logical remainders? Remember how many configurations we had? 2 raised to power 32, right? And within 32, only a few were empirically observed, like 5, 6, 7, 8, probably, right? Remember that? And we removed all those configurations which had no empirical observation. Did you lose me? Or Emma, did you kick me out?
No, we hear you.
Oh, I thought it was on hold, right?
No.
Okay. So what was I saying? Okay. Well, so do we understand the concept that the possible combinations would follow always a permutation logic, 2 raised to power n, and n would be the causal conditions? We get that point, right? All of us? Right? Okay. Now, what would happen is within the total possible combinations, our empirical data would not correspond to those. Our empirical data would only be supporting 5, 6 configurations. We keep that and get complex solution. We remove the configurations which have zero membership. We didn't find any cases belonging to them. We remove that in truth table minimization. We call that as logical remainders. We remove that to get complex solution, but we add them again just to get a more results beyond our empirical data. So that's what we call logical remainders are added in parsimonious solution. So complex solution and parsimonious solution are different because parsimonious solution includes logical remainders, right? And the idea is to get results beyond the empirical sample. Now, the third one, which is most popularly used, it's a compromise between complex and you got complex, you got parsimonious. Now you tell the software that my theoretical explanations, because that's logical or people know, people have done research and they tell that if a country is literate, so democracy should survive. So you get that from prior substantive knowledge. So you tell the algorithm that use this, and that would give a compromise between complex and parsimonious solution. That's why intermediate solution is most widely reported. With me now? Okay. Now, Ahmed has talked about this one as well. Okay, and these are results. Now, what you results, so we just explained complex, parsimonious, complex, simple, empirical. You can read this. So there are two pathways, right? We saw that there were two configurations leading to that one. So that tells us conjunction. That also tells us equifinality. And because we have done asymmetric analysis, we also have included the third one as well, because we ran truth table twice, presence and absence. And normally what we do is we report the answers in terms of, so that's a combination, a country with developed and literate, but may not be industrial, and is stable would contribute to the stable democracy, because these results are just for stable, right? You need to, if you're doing for the other, the asymmetrical, the negation of stable, which is breakdown, you need to report that, and I'll show that later as well. And another pathway is equifinal. A developed, urban, literate, and stable country would constitute the second pathway towards the stable survival of democracy. Now, these are how we generally report results. I'll have more examples. The coverage is it's somewhat similar to R-square, but not really. What it tells is the empirical strength of the solution, showing the number of cases following a specific path to the outcome. So number in terms of total proportion, how many number of cases would be along this pathway. So that's what Elvaro, you asked about that one, right? So it's more of a R-square statistical, how much we are covering, our observations covering to the overall population. That's what, somewhat, but not really. But that's an easy explanation, okay? Okay. Any questions so far? What I've done is I've just re-emphasized what Ahmed has done. With me now? Let's go further, and thank you, Ahmed, for that one. Now, as Ahmed mentioned, many of your questions that have not been answered should be answered now. If not, stop us. So what we have done is, so far, we have ran a basic model, talk about high level, but now let's go much deeper. Now, there are different variants to QCA, right? Okay. One is crisp set, then there's fuzzy set. Crisp set is the data that you saw. Instead of having from 0 to 1, like you saw, what you saw was continuous fuzzy set. A condition could be 0.81. It was a continuous scale, right? You saw in your calibration, the country's membership. But it doesn't have to be like that. It could be simply 1, 0, which is called crisp set. But obviously, it's somewhat limited. It could be 3-point, it could be 4-point, it could be 6-point fuzzy. The first condition is 0, then we've got a middle point 0.5, and then we've got 1. So we calibrate our case membership to a condition based on either crisp set, based on a 3-value fuzzy set, based on 4-value, or 6. So 4 value is an interesting one because we'll talk more about that when we'll be talking about the qualitative cases. So what for each case along a explanatory variable, we'll say either its membership is 0, it doesn't have any of that membership or traits, or it has somewhat, but still not that much. It's more out than in. So we call that 0.33. And then if it has more representation of that condition, we say it's more in than out, so 0.67. And 1 is it's fully in, it's 100% representative of that condition. So it's got fuzzy scale, 4-point fuzzy scale. I have used mainly 4-point or 3-point. For my survey research, I've used 3 value fuzzy set. So what I do is if 1, 3, 5 survey, 1 would be 0, fully out, 3 would be the middle ground, 0.5, and 5 would be fully in. That's how a survey scale works, right? Likert scale. For my qualitative data that I will share shortly with you, I use 4-value fuzzy set. But there are studies that have 6. The more the fuzzy points, the more the variation, right? So that's what if you got a 7-point Likert scale, the variation is pronounced. That's what some people prefer, 7-point. But I'll tell you why I used 4 fuzzy point for my qualitative. For 5-point Likert scale, this 3-value fuzzy set works very, very well. Okay, the different type of QCs. So for the degree of democratization of a country, we had a continuous fuzzy set. Okay. Okay. No. Okay. I'll go here. I'll put everything there. Now, what type of projects are suitable for QCA? Now we are talking, our whole point is in theory, it could be applicable to both qualitative and quantitative research design. We now know that it's being implemented much more on quantitative. And the usage and the other usage is, causal recipes, the configuration, the combination logic, different ways of seeing how outcomes are created. That's equifinal, that's combinative, and third one is the asymmetry, complementarity, and another. In the 2020, 2021, when I was going through, they described the combinative as a complementarity, same way of looking at this thing, and substitution. One element goes away and then added, and still that's equifinality as well. Conjectural and Inus causation, when multiple things need to come together. People generally do not use it for hypothesis testing. They call it proposition testing. I don't know why. It's in the semantic. I went brave, and for one of my papers, I called it hypothesis testing because I was just positivist, right? What I did was I came up with a framework, collected Likert scale data, and tested the hypothesis. Call it hypothesis, call it proposition, but some people would call it, no. If you're using QCA, you need to use proposition. Why? I don't know. But what we need to do is, if we are using it for hypothesis testing or call it proposition testing, we need to make sure that the proposition or hypothesis reflect what QCA is used for: conjecture, equifinal, and asymmetry. Typology is the first typology was FIS 2011. So what he did was he used there's 4 strategy literature type of. So that's what he did. But there's some it was not a typology development. It was more of a typology testing. In my recent paper last year for qualitative data, I came up with the typology. I'll talk about that later on. There are some other papers now they're talking about development of typologies. How I'll talk more in a few minutes. Okay, now talking about implementation. Now here is the key. Here is some of your questions would come here. Now, if you're using it for a survey-based, or if you are doing it for secondary, essentially you're doing a quantitative study. Whatever you will do for a stats-based study, front end, you will probably do some positive study, right? You'll employ the element of a positivist or confirmatory research. You'll have a framework, theory-informed framework. If it's a survey-based research, you need to ensure measurement validity. You will run a measurement model. But now, instead of regression analysis or AMOS or PLS, what you do is you run an fsQCA. That's what essentially is the case. But you need to make sure that your measurement is right, your reliability of data is right, your data collection is right, all those if you're doing it for survey. And if you're doing it for secondary data, you need to ensure that the proxy measures are well supported. So till the point you go and do stats, everything before needs to be similar to a positivist or confirmatory research. Now, qualitative studies, and a lot of you are interested, and I think I've laid some grounds for that when the focus of the study is not in terms of explaining an outcome, it's more of an understanding an outcome, because then your focus is not purely in terms of explaining an outcome in terms of input variables. So then interpretivist study that I call is not, you will have difficulty in applying. But if you start with critical realism, and my love for critical realism just developed because for QCA, and I realized that critical realism is somewhere again in between a pure inductive study and a pure deductive study, or pure interpretive study, or a pure positive study, somewhere in between, as I showed you earlier as well. And that can bring it, and how I'll talk about that one. And I've got this paper as well. You click on it, we'll share the slides with you. You click on this one, and probably you should get a free copy of this. You should be able to, as you mentioned, you need to have a look at this thing. Okay, we didn't talk about calibration because we assumed the data was calibrated. But calibration is the most important thing in QCA. As you saw, whatever analysis you would run, you will get an answer like that. So QCA would give you an output, right? For that output to mean something, it has to be theoretically informed, plus it needs to be properly calibrated. And so what calibration is, as I mentioned earlier, so calibration is rating any case between 0 to 1. So it could be Likert scale, 1 to 5. It could be a qualitative data, right? But you need to rank it between 0 to 1. That's the process of calibration, as somebody asked, right? So the example, we already had calibrated data, right? Now we can have qualitative data as input, we can have quantitative, and we'll talk about that. For 5-point Likert scale, as I mentioned, 5-point Likert is 1, 3, 5. You can use a 3 fuzzy set. 0 could be 1, which is no membership. 5 is full membership, it's 1. And crossover point, more towards full membership or more towards 0 membership. So that would be 3. Or if it's a 7-point Likert scale, it could be 1, 3.5, 7. So people have used different. And what's the logic? I'll also talk about that later. Now, the key thing is Crackhammer's, again, the same set of organization research scholars, Funari, they're the same set of people they've been working, and they came up with this best practices. So it's more of a methods best practice. And this phrase is very, very important. And if we understand this phrase, I think our calibration would be the conceptual clarity behind this would be very, very good for us to implement. They say effective calibration is half conceptual and half empirical process of identifying thresholds that meaningfully represent differences in kind and differences in degree. Now let's decipher this great statement. Now start reverse. Differences in kind and differences in degree. So what you're doing is you're trying to identify patterns towards an outcome. For that, you need differences in kind. Your data should result, or your configurations after calibration should result in both high outcome, low outcome. Your Y after in truth table should be having both 1 and 0. If it's just 1, if it's just 0, it's nothing there. It's not capturing the meaning. So you probably, it's not going to do anything, right? So differences in kind is that your configurations or your truth table should result in different outcomes. High, presence, absence, 1 or 0, the outcome. And the second one is differences in degree. Your input combinations should also have some differences. If you've got just one configuration and that's having all case membership, that means your calibration is not right. You need to have multiple configurations. Some of those should lead to outcome. Some of those should not lead to outcome. That's what we would call as meaningful represent differences in kind and differences in degree. With me now? Good? Or need clarity? Silence is not good.
Well, it needs practice, actually.
Okay. If you get the concept, I'll show you in a table just now. Okay. So we now understand meaningful differences in kind and differences in degree. Now, if we do not get that through some conceptual calibration rules, like I said, 135, if you don't get it, then we need to dump this rule. We need to use another rule. So calibration rules are only need to be accepted if they result in meaningful differences in kind and differences in degree. If they don't, we revisit our calibration rules. That's the very, very important concept. And sometimes no conceptual rule can give you those meaningful differences in kind and differences in degree. Then what you could do is you can use sample average. You can use sample something. You can use the sample information, not outside sample. But if your conceptual measures are not giving you the differences in kind and differences in degree. With me now? Let me give you some example of this, what may be a new concept. Okay. So I think I've talked about survey research, right? I've talked about, I'll talk about calibration in more detail, but now I've talked about everything survey research. Same, when you go to stats, instead of stats, you use the QCA. But very important is that your hypothesis should reflect QCA attributes, not the general linear relationship that the normal stats guys. So you need to be framing your hypothesis like a quantitative QCA research. So I'm now quoting my own research, which you excuse me for, but I think it really, if you go and read after this meeting, you read this one, you're going to find a close alignment and more detailed explanation. You see these four hypotheses, they're very different. You call them proposition, you call them hypothesis, call them whatever. But essentially what they're doing is they're representing some relationships, and through our data, we'll test those relationships. But these relationships are not linear. If you look at them, we're talking about interdependence, which is combinative. What we're saying is that social and technical subsystems both need to be present for, it's based on agile projects, right? For agile outcomes. We both need to be present, right? If one is missing, we would not have the outcome, successful outcome. The second one is talking about within the social and technical, which conditions need to be present. Again, it's combinative. It's combinative. It's focusing on substitution. It's focusing upon complementary. It's talking about set logic. So you can use QCA for survey research, but you need to reflect the QCA attributes. Third one is talking about equifinality. There are multiple arrangements through which we can reach it. Again, it's an equifinality. The fourth one is talking about asymmetry, that the absence of a condition that causes an outcome would not necessarily mean that we'll have the absence of an outcome. So all the four attributes, or the three attributes of conjecture, equifinality, and the third one is asymmetry, are reflected to the context of agile projects. That paper, and you can click on this one and it will take you this thing. So if you're using a survey research, it must reflect a confirmatory or positivist research design with QCA set logic. Now here comes the qualitative research. I'm very, very passionate about this one. The whole reason of this workshop between, is that I and Ahmed said this message needs to be spread. Now, we've talked about QCA for quantitative. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's for qualitative data. And what we are saying is Then not only it does, it uses qualitative data for an explanatory research based on critical realism, it also generates middle range theory, because all the literature beyond I've studied, they say middle range theory must correspond to critical realism. So middle range theory, critical realism, and QCA all come together based on these 5 steps. What I am telling you here, 5 steps, like positivism, critical realism also starts with a theoretically informed framework. You need to identify why and which causal conditions would explain the outcome. You got that theoretical grounding. And I say that critical realism ontology, read this paper and try to explain it as simple as possible. You don't really have to complete grasp, enough to understand what critical realism implementation means. And then based on our theoretical grounding, the phase 2 is we start the theoretical sampling. Okay, if I'm studying, in this case, it was supply chain resilience. So we needed to have, because theoretical sampling, we need to have enough, or we need to have representation of the supply chain. So it was food. So we've got, fruit picker and different companies that would correspond to food supply chain. We've got enough representation of theoretical. So this is simply that phase 1 and phase 2 is common to any research, nothing special. Phase 3 is the within case analysis, which is like a typical qualitative thematic analysis. You conduct a thematic analysis, inductive thematic analysis, irrespective of the theoretical framing that we identified in phase 1. However, once all the inductive themes have been identified, we need to frame them in a deductive framework. So the analysis becomes what we call as inductive, deductive thematic analysis. Stage 1 is inductive, and then putting those themes in a framework, which in this case I identified supply chain resilience would correspond to 4 input variables. In the next slide, I'll talk about that one. After we have put them in an inductive deductive analysis and put them in a deductive framework, now is the task to calibrate the qualitative data. Again, what we need to do in a calibrated qualitative data, how to do it, we need to identify a crossover point, right? Where beyond that will be towards full membership, below that will be non-membership. This is what we need to do on a scale of 0 to 1. That's what calibration is. So these three, how to do that, that has been the sticking point. So because to do these 3 things, we need to result in differences in kind and differences in extent and magnitude, right? This is what we need to be doing. Okay, now when I was doing this thing, I came across 2, 3, 4 papers, one in information system, one in marketing, and 1 or 2 others as well. They had used an approach that I built on and extended by introducing the middle range theorizing and also the critical realism. So that's what my contribution was. What they do is they identify theoretical cases, theoretical ideal types. Theoretical ideal types means a case does not exist. For example, best case scenario, worst case scenario. So they identify 2 extremes. And when they analyze their own data, they examine their data in light of the extremes. And they say, do they belong to this worst case scenario, or do they belong to the best case scenario, or in between? That's what the logic is. That can help us get calibrated qualitative data. Once we get the qualitative data calibrated, it becomes like a QCA studies, like the democratization thing. We really don't know where it came from, right? We just need to do analysis. But how to achieve that point? So theoretical ideal types. How? I explain in the next slide. So that's part of phase 3, right? So you do a fuzzy calibration based on theoretical ideal types. Once you have done that, then what you do is phase 4 was what you just did. You rank truth table, you got the solution. And the 5th one is, here we talk about the typology development, and that will be We'll talk about how we can develop a typology based on this one. So we have done phase 4. Phase 3, the calibration we'll talk about. Yes, please.
If I understood correctly, the calibration phase is more or less subjective. Is it right?
It needs to be evidence-based, not subjective.
For example, based on the focus groups or interviews, then we will give, for example, a number, a range of number between 0 and 1, that, yeah, probably my co-author also, for example, I give the number 0.5 and my co-author says, no, from my point of view, it's 0.6 or 0.7. You know, this was the subjective that I meant. Couldn't this happen that two people have two different perspectives on this calibration?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right? Absolutely. This is what, now there are two things that can come, right? Yes, you're right. But how to navigate that, I'll show you in the next slide. Absolutely. That's a possibility. Yes, Ahmed?
Yes, I just want to highlight that if you can just wait for one more slide, not the next one, the slide later, there's an example and we will stop there and then we can answer your question there. All right. And then we will ask you another question prepared from now, that if this is your research, can you, I mean, if you understand this example, can you apply this for your research or not? So just wait, just one more slide.
But it's a good point, and it's good that you're with me, which is fantastic, right? So this is what we wanted at this stage.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now the theoretical framework which I used was based on some prior theory, is that supply chain resilience can be explained through co-opetition, a practice of co-opetition, through strategic sourcing, and then there's supply chain collaboration, and the fourth one has been missing, is removed because the paper was long, right? But you can see that in the paper, right? So there were 4 causal conditions based on a theoretical framework. Now what I did was I used a 4-point fuzzy scale because for me it was more practical, right? 6 means, a lot of work and probably the disproportionate to the effect that they would have made towards the results. It's more practical. So what we did was, and Mahdi's question is very important here. So we said, okay, what are theoretically worst case looks like in co-opetition? No evidence of cooperation. There's simply no cooperation. Cooperation is, simultaneous cooperation with your horizontal and vertical partners, so competitors and your suppliers. So through our interview data, we did not find any evidence. The ideal type is there is simply no evidence for that one in our interview data, right? Or when we see that. Strategic sourcing, there is simply none. So all fully out means the worst case scenario. This is theoretical. We haven't gone to our empirical analysis as yet. It's just ideal type. It's just theoretical. It's worst case scenario. And then one is the best case scenario. We document that, right? How it looks like so that it is clear and all the co-researchers can have similar understanding. So what we did was 0 and 1. We identified 2 extreme cases for all the causal conditions and for the outcome of supply chain resilience as well. We identified that. And it's clearly stated in the paper as appendix. Then why we opted for 4 points? Because we thought maybe, yes, if we have more, maybe it's a little bit more tricky, but we can readily define or describe a little bit of co-opetition, but still not that much. That would lead us towards full membership. So that's 0.33. But if we got more evidence of full co-opetition towards, but not completely full co-opetition, what we do is we give it 0.66. So we identified, now at this stage, it is simply our researchers' explanation of theoretical ideal types. So we had 4 theoretical ideal types along all the 4 fuzzy points, fuzzy thresholds that we identified. Now going to the point of what Mehdi mentioned. So what we did was, if we gave a case a 1 value, we identified an illustrative code for that one, why we think it belongs to that category. And then we also explained why we think it should belong to that category. Very transparent. As much as another thing that you don't have it, you can, and which we, I think, write in our paper, is that there are two of us. We talked to each other. If there were doubts, we both went back and we ensured that this has 100% inter-rater reliability between the two of us. That's how you can. So it would start as subjective, but then you would try to make it as much as evidence-backed as you can. Obviously, nothing you can make 100%. It's still qualitative, right? Interpretation, but you try. For each allocation, we've got quotes from each case. So it's long. The appendix would be long, but it will be very solid, very transparent, very evidence-backed. So now this is how we have converted. Now see, if we were to add 2 more fuzzy conditions, that would be simple, that would be, computationally very, very difficult. Yes, please.
Yeah, I have a quick question regarding this. So is there because I was questioning how to prove that in the paper, but you kind of explained it here now. But is there a given standard already, an established standard in literature that you say, I don't know, if for example, with the thematic coding, that you usually have a standard that everyone kind of provides in order to say, okay, this is valid. Is there a standard for QCA yet for this to prove, okay, we did it in the right way? I like the way that you put it here in this paper, but is this the way that you usually do it?
Thank you, Manu. Are you survey quantitative researcher?
No, I'm actually more of a qualitative researcher, I'd say.
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Good question. Now, see, I think the point that you are stating, right? Everything can be objectified and clear standards can be implemented. It leans towards positivism, which is fine. For stats, we've got right? We do this thing, very easy. I am a positivist, right? And interpretivist is totally different. It's all can be interpreted in different way. Now, we have critical realism, actually. And critical realism, that's the starting point. And I love critical realism because that's so good. And so see, I'm moving towards critical realism. What critical realism says is that there are things out there, that there's a reality is 3-layered. Things are there, but they would not always result in an outcome. So things are there, right? But sometimes they will result in an outcome. And only very limited times we can empirically observe those. So see, and that's what truth is, right? This is what reality is. And so the events that you see, they may not be actually happening all the time. They would be a limited manifestation of what's happening out there. So that's what critical realism is. Now, how I have done it, if you read this one, is because critical realism philosophic positioning is very important to understand, right? Because we just claim is that there's no single truth. That's number one, right? Now, how we framed this one was, we actually cited a number of reasons. They have done this thing, and we were very, very transparent. They have done like this. We think this should be done. So it's more of a, now you could actually, I hope, you and others as well, read this one and build on this thing, critique this one. There might be some shortcoming in this one. Fix those and give a reason for those. Build on those. If you think it's reasonable, apply it for yours. Hopefully, one day. Okay? Good?
Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so this is total transparency, reproducibility, nothing. It's more like in a court of law, you're putting your evidence base to drive your argument. It's that. You can be successful, reviewers can come back and ask for more, and that probably you're learning and enriching of what has been done. So it's a 5-stage process, right? Okay. Now what I'm saying is, remember, if you go back here, Okay. So I told phase 1 and 2 somewhat, nuanced, but they are part of every research that you do. Somewhat different here and there, but you'll have to do those two phases. Phase 3 was the important one. First, you need to do inductive, or you get abductive analysis, inductive, deductive. You keep going in between. And so I've explained that, how I did. And you keep going back. So if, for example, Mahdi, you and your authors are sort of, they don't agree, then you go back to data. It's abductive, continuous iteration between the inductive and deductive analysis. And phase 4, Ahmed kindly did it for you. So you now know the phase 4. We have done the calibration. Phase 4 was exactly what you did over there. Now let's go to phase 5, which is very, and that's what Louisa mentioned in typology development. So I remember giving this workshop, somebody asked me, what is the difference between typology and taxonomy, right? I knew the definition of typology. I knew the definition of taxonomy. But the way I was using QCA, for me, it was giving taxonomy. So what taxonomy is, so typology and taxonomy are two classification approaches, classifying data onto some categorization. Taxonomy is empirics generated, right? And typology, by definition, is theoretically informed classification. I was always wondering, QC, I'm developing this thing based on empirics, how this is typology, although typology. Then it stuck to me, if I use critical realism or any other positivism as well, but if you've got a theoretically informed framework, and if I run QC analysis, then it's a typology. So that's the first thing. Because of our theoretically informed and configurational theorizing thing, whatever empirics we are generating, they are corresponding, or they are a result of our initial theoretically informed analysis, which is giving us this typology. So that's just a very subtle nuance that took me 3-4 years to understand. I've explained to you. Now this paper, Funari, again the same set of people, Greg Hammer, and there's, I think, City University London. They came up with this paper in Academy of Management 2020. They talked about this approach, configuration theorizing approach. So they had 3 stages, good enough, somewhat similarity covered directly and indirectly in my framework. But the thing that I really want to emphasize is stage 3. They talk about naming, and naming is an important element of typology. You name. This is what FIS did in 2011. So what you see here is, so stage 2, we've talked about that, think conjunctively. We've talked the first one as well. But also I want to emphasize, a continuous iteration, going back to cases, continuous iteration. That's what you see here. So let's focus on stage 3, which I used in my framework as well. I used this one. So articulate with simplicity, capture the whole, evoke the essence of configuration. These are the 3 things that they suggest. And I tried to implement that in my paper. So the information that you saw was confusing. There's a lot of information, right? So you would be doing research. Ahmed has prepared it. I have prepared it. I know what the research, but for a layman, and you want your research to be impactful, right? Somebody just quickly going through what this research says, they can understand what your configurations mean. That's what they say, articulate with simplicity, and what the whole essence of that configuration is. And third one is evoke, capture the whole argument and talk about in terms of configuration. I use these 3 and make an argument, as mentioned is manual, is that I make an argument why I named it like this. That is an important part of it, and I try to address these 3 elements here. So this is again my qualitative paper that you can find here. I said high supply chain resilience would have 2 configurations, 2 pathways. In the first configuration 1, there needs to be cooperation present. So, it's solid, cooperation needs to be present. There needs to be supply chain collaboration as well. Supply chain agility should be there, and the case membership, there were these cases that corresponded to this configuration. When I think of this, evoke the whole, what does this whole phenomena is talking about? So it's talking about that, it's agility, so it's agile. Synergizer means that supply chain collaboration is vertical, cooperation is both horizontal. So there needs to be synergy. There needs to be a lot of collaboration and then agility. So we named it Agile Synergizer. That brings multiple attributes together, gives an easy understanding, and captures the whole lot. And all the cases that belong to this one, what we have done is we have identified an Agile Synergizer type of organizations. So one of the types is Agile Synergizer, and these companies belong to those. And another is Sourcing Synergizer. Again, collaboration and cooperation, but this time supply chain agility is gone. Sourcing is being substituted to get the same outcome, equifinality. What we get here is another set of companies that would correspond to Sourcing Synergizer. So we have developed a typology based on those 4 attributes of these organizations, a classification. We've classified them. That's a typology that we've developed. And then we name as well so that we can easily understand. The right side that you see here is, again, asymmetrical. We need to make sure that we've got asymmetrical analysis performed as well. And we see that, this is a very good example of causal asymmetry. Cooperation needs to be present all the time when there's high supply chain resilience. But if it's absence, like parochialist, which is they just do things by themselves. I had to Google a nice English word for this one. So they just do it by themselves. There's no competition. When there's an empty space there, that means it doesn't really matter whether it's present or absent. So that means there's asymmetrical relationship. Competition it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be low for the low supply chain resilience. Similarly, we've got multi-sourcing. One of the configuration, it doesn't matter because it's neither there, it's neither present, neither absent. But all these 3 conditions that you see in configuration 3, parochialist, multi-sourcing needs to be absent, supply chain collaboration needs to be absent, and supply chain agility. If these 3 are absent, we would have a company that would be resulting their supply chain resilience. They would not be able to recover from shocks. So we had some organizations corresponding to that. So we have 3 typologies based on asymmetrical analysis: Agile Synergizer, Sourcing Synergizer, and Parochialist. And we provide as much within the constraint of word count and justifications of why we have named this thing. So with that, what we have done is we have achieved QCA application, configurational theorizing, which is middle range theory because it's focused on a context, supply chain resilience context, specific context. And we have come up with a typology of 3 organization types. Any questions at this stage? Oh gosh, we're really running out of time. Yes, please.
I had a question about the configurations, 3 configurations. Are they achieved in an explanatory way or more confirmatory? I mean, it existed, those categories or those configurations already existed, or no, you achieved these 3 different clusters, I can say, and then named them in this way.
The second, so it's not a positivist research, so I didn't confirm this typology. It's a typology, is theoretically informed. It's not empirical based, right? So what I have done is, based on the critical realism positioning, qualitative data based on the 5 steps I've done. You see the pathways that Ahmed generated. One pathway, so it's intermediate solution. So I think I haven't mentioned it. It's intermediate solution. So I had 2 intermediate solution. Which one was the configuration 1, Agile Synergizer? Configuration is simply a combination of different conditions that would result in an outcome as our final solution, intermediate solution. And I had 2 for high supply chain resilience, and I had 1 for low supply chain resilience when I ran the analysis for the asymmetric analysis. Okay, Maggie? Yes, please.
Sorry for so many questions. I'm just there's this one little point I'm stuck with. Like, I know that the low supply chain resilience, that is your, how did we call it before? Like the negation. Yes, exactly. But the high supply chain resilience, how did you come up with the case? Was it already sure that the companies that are in this set, like I'm missing the link to this ground truth, like to the, let's say, the outcome. How did you make sure that, like, how do you know now? Did you know in advance that people were, like, these companies were?
No. So I'll tell you what happens.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
No, good. Yeah, it's a good. See, it's your first foray into this one, right? So obviously, these things that come to your mind, it's good that you can ask me and resolve those rather than spending a little bit more time as well. See, we have 4 explanatory. Sorry, I know sometimes I start a little bit backwards, right? So 4 input conditions and an outcome, right? We need to calibrate all inputs and outputs, correct?
Yes.
We calibrated based, for this particular case, we use qualitative data. We had ideal types. So we also had ideal types for supply chain resilience. We asked an interview question. Were you able to recover after that strawberries needles were recovered? No, we struggled for 10 days. We did not have this. No, we were good. Next day we had this thing. So that's 1, that's 0. You're getting my point?
Yeah. Okay.
And that would then we'll calibrate, then we'll run truth table analysis. So this is the end result that Ahmed ran, the end result. We are presenting them in a different way by evoking the notion of naming, trying what that configuration represents so that people can read this. Now you can understand, agile synergizer, people need to work together, right? Okay, and that agility. So you can understand that's what the Ferrari people said in 2020. That's the third stage, the naming stage. And that leads to typology. So we saw that the 3 different possibilities, right, for outcomes, and companies can be categorized along those. And that's what our typology is. And these are theoretically informed now.
Yeah, I think I got it. Thanks.
Okay, let's go further. Now this is very, very important. The paper that Malik and all you saw, the industrial marketing management, I think the reviewer was very good with methods. I didn't know much. So when I presented the result, and that reviewer made me produce an online appendix explaining all calibration, explaining contradictory. So it's, if you read that, I think you should actually, and it's there, online appendix. It will give you a lot more clarity, and I think it's written well, right? You should be able to. If not, then you can write back to me. Remember, what is the suggestion is effective calibration is half conceptual and half empirical process. You can use conceptual or you can use average standard deviations. Conceptual could be 135 outside the sample. But the key thing is differences in kind and differences in degree, which I just mentioned. Your outcome, if this is your outcome, it needs to have both differences in kind. And we need to have differences in degrees. This needs to be there, right? Otherwise, you won't have anything else. Now, because it's asymmetrical analysis, and any QCA study that you think does not report asymmetrical, people have published with that, but that's one of the core elements is missing. So what they say, Schneider and Wegman, they're based in Europe, they've done a lot of work, they've published books, which I like as well, is they talked about a logical paradox that Ahmed talked about as well, but more on this one. See, what I've done is I have bring together both truth table. Truth table for high, outcome, and negation. For survived and negation of survived. Right? I've put them together. Because these configurations, right? These configurations would be same, only this is the new thing and their consistency information. So I plotted that. There were 4 input conditions, there were 16 configurations. You see this one here is there's a star there. So of 3 steric here, what you see this configuration is 0. So it's contributing to the lack of this one, but this configuration is also contributing to this one here. Lack of, it's giving the same, it's contributing to both. Similarly, if you go here, 8, what it is telling you that this combination would contribute to presence of an outcome, high outcome. But this combination, if you go further, would also contribute to the absence of outcome. How is that possible? A thing that leads to, me going to sleep, the same thing would help me not going to sleep. That's not possible. That means I have, sort of blundered with my calibration. I need to go back and change my calibration. So presence of the contradictory configuration is the first thing that your calibration is not up to the mark. So your results doesn't really mean anything. See, the Amman example didn't have any contradictory configuration. It was nicely calibrated. Now, one way to pick contradictory configuration is visual inspection, which I just show you, right? Another one is what I call the proportional reduction in inconsistency. Remember, it was reported there, as I'll talk about PRI consistency later, is anything less than 0.5, and this is the PR, anything less than 0.5, you see here, 8. So the PRI consistency is 0.45, which is less than 0.5. It needs to be more than 0.5. If it's less than, then there is a problem. And if you see it here, it's on the boundary. One rule is to anything that's less than 0.5, you exclude that from your analysis. That's one rule. But in my case, they were both on the border lines. So you keep the one that's has PRI consistency more than, but both were on the line. Another one is, which I actually wrote to another of the, I've forgotten his Arch Pride, something, marketing guy, a lot of QCA work. I wrote to him, and he brought his he brought my attention to what we call deviant case analysis. So what he did was he plotted that as Y and X, and he examined which reflect not, plausible behavior. So in this case, what I did was I'm plotting both configurations here and here and trying to see which cases I should exclude. And I provide that explanation in my online appendix. You can go and read that. But if in my case, what happened was because of positivist survey-based research, I couldn't recalibrate a lot, right? It was very restricted. And then in order to set the contradictory configuration, I had to rely on the deviant case analysis to exclude, to make my answers, devoid of any apparent logical paradox, right? So we did that. And the reviewers after 2 years and 3 big was let it go, which was, but it's a very, very evidence-backed. Again, it may not be perfect, but whatever is being done is being put together with a lot of evidence and arguments. Okay. Now, in conclusion, so fsQCA research best practices are similar to any quality research, evidence-based, mainly calibration, resolving logical contradictions, I explained to you. Transparency, people should know what has been done, why and how, should be reproducible. If you can do that, I think the rest is everything is. And then some best practices, I put 2 of my studies because I think if you read those, this Malik and R is survey-based, and this Malik and Ali 2024, very proud of this one as well. It's not that high a journal, but still, it's qualitative. So you read this one, and with that, we conclude our presentation. Just last thing is, we run a community of practice. We talk about these things, and I've got a Teams group. We can meet, and we meet every now and then there as well. And now, if you want to join to grow your knowledge, I remember one person joined 2 years ago. He eventually published in one of the journals. He used to write to me, and I used to help him. He attended the other day as well. And despite being part of and being published QCA, we were talking about something, and Ahmed was there as well. And he said, no, he gained new insights as well. So if you want to join, we can circulate that to you and be part of the group, trying to improve our collective knowledge. With that, I conclude, and thank you very much for your attention. I think we have exceeded time. Ahmed, over to you now, please.
Thank you, Mohsen. First, I will ask, does anyone have any question? Okay, I will ask two questions, actually. First, do you think you can apply this to your research? And the second question, I understand that if you didn't apply this before, you may face some challenges. So how do you think we can support you in this? Because we have community of practice, and you can join, and we can keep in touch, and we can support you there. So what do you think? Do you think you can apply this to your research? What kind of challenges that you may face initially? It's early to talk about these, but I just want to hear from insights from you about it.
I agree. I think I agree. I think the area of research that I'm looking at is the GRC model, the GRC framework, and the compliance area. And I see there's a lot of potential where this can be implemented. I have not seen many work on that area, but at this moment I don't know how we would use that. I need to really use some of these things and then maybe do a little bit of off envelope check before I come back to you. But I'm taking this as a approval from you that I can reach out to you and trouble you for some of these questions that may come up later on.
Anytime.
Yeah, by all means, and we can join the community of practice. We get more opportunities. That's up to you. So I understand. It's an introduction, right? So what I have been talking to you is based on my 10 years of learning. 10 years of long. It's a long time. So it's I can communicate that to you in 3.5 hours. But obviously you will go back and you've got some idea and go and read those resources. I think you should be pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty simple. You just need to follow a little bit of a guideline. We had some questions here. Thanks. Yes.
Well, more of a commentary. First of all, thank you for this very complete introduction to QCAs. I could apply it to my research. However, I think my main problem is the calibration, especially of interview data. Like, how do I make sure, and I know you stressed very much that it's theory informed. But a lot of interview data is new insights. So how can I think the biggest challenge will be calibrating, and maybe for the future, it would be cool to have a workshop about calibrating QCA data.
Yeah, we could actually, we could, and at this stage, that's the main stumbling block. There are pathways towards that. Probably in the next, you some of the things that I probably go deeper into this one and improve your understanding and get back to us, and we can have another workshop. Yeah, that's what we are here. But the thing is, in research, it's not that straightforward, as you would know, right? You need to have a lot of reflection and lot of iteration between, and you just attended 3.5 hours, right? Imagine staying in your class where somebody sits, when they finish this one, you do not expect them to be a master of the subject, right? It's an introduction. They will build, it's a primer, right? But hopefully, I'm very, very passionate about this one, and I'm happy to stay in touch and happy to help further. Thanks.
Thank you. And regarding the quantitative, if your research is quantitative, I can help you also with calibration of quantitative, regardless you are using survey or you already use survey and you analyze using PLS or regression. I can help you with that section as well. Any other insights, comments, feedback? I can see Luminita. Yes, I will share. What I will do later, I will share the slides, the video, and the link to the community of practice for you as well.
And also Ahmed, I asked Ahmed to prepare a 3-point. Do it now, Ahmed, please, before they go. They'll forget, right? So just just your between us is me and Ahmed, and see, we tried. So our objective was to. I know it's deep, it's rich, but we wanted to get you started as well. We wanted to get you started and keep going on this one. So so we tried to come up with some arrangement, and we wanted to get your feedback on how did we do. So please click on just 3 questions, right? Thank you.
And after you finish, I would like to take a screenshot for everyone if you agree to post it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, we must, with your permission, but we must. The resilient mob, right? We stayed here. We stayed put to our objective.
Master, can you please stop sharing your screen?
Oh, yeah. Oh, really?
Yep. Thank you.
I always use 2-3 screens, so that's why I really don't know which one I'm sharing. One.
All right, I sent the link, the survey link to the chat box.
And we can see beautiful Switzerland in the background, Mehdi. You're outdoors?
Yeah. I'm now out. I'm going to the office, and so I'm.
No, good. See? We are doing some sightseeing.
Yeah, I also wanted to suggest, if everybody accepts, we have a LinkedIn group, and then there we can share our experiences regarding the fsQCA or ask questions if it's fine for everybody. I don't know whether it's a good suggestion or not.
We can do LinkedIn. You can follow the community of practice. LinkedIn, probably there'll be few as well. We can do LinkedIn. We can do community of practice. We can do both. We can make a community of practice, because community of practice is then again our medium through which we connect. It's on Teams online, right? And then email in as well. But we can do that over LinkedIn as well. Happy to consider that. Yeah.
Okay, everyone, smile. I will take the screenshot now. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. I will send it to you. I think I need to repeat it. I have Survivo. You are closing your eyes. So one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'll send it to you. Here we go.
And feel free to add me to your LinkedIn and send me a LinkedIn message anyways, if that's handy. Easy.
Yes. Again, remember, I will send you the link for community of practice. You are most welcome to join. There's another workshop on 2nd of July with
Federico is coming. Federico is coming to talk about, yeah. So we'll have events. We'll have him.
Yeah, chief and editor-chief and A-Star Journal, actually. And yes, we can support you after this workshop. Anytime, you just feel free to contact us, and we can conduct another meeting or workshop or whatever you ask for. Yeah, all right.
And Louisa, if we can have a bit of chat. During the meeting, I got a message, my flight is cancelled now. No, what to do now? Louisa, can we stay back, please? And we can stop recording. Thank you.
Yep, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Ahmed, did we stop recording?
Just now, and I will leave you now. Louisa, enjoy your stay in Jordan.